I used to believe that success was measured by the zeros in your bank account and the gleam of admiration in others' eyes. For 25 years, I'd built that success brick by brick, a thriving investment firm, a mansion in Greenwich, Connecticut, and a beautiful wife who still turned heads at charity galas. My name, Michael Harrison, carried weight in boardrooms and country clubs alike. But success, I would learn, is as fragile as spun glass. The day everything began to unravel started like any other. I was reviewing quarterly reports in my home office, the morning sun streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked our meticulously maintained garden. Iris, my wife of 20 years, was hosting her weekly tennis group. From my vantage point, I could see them gathered by the pool afterward, their laughter carrying across the manicured lawn. Iris stood out among them, her honey blonde hair catching the light, her tennis outfit accentuating a figure that belied her 45 years. "You're a lucky man, Mike," David Chen, my newest partner, had said at last month's firm party. His eyes had lingered a moment too long on Iris as she charmed our clients with her usual grace. "Some men spend their whole lives chasing what you've got." I hadn't missed the hint of something darker in his tone, envy, perhaps, or something more complex. David was younger than me by 15 years, hungry and ambitious in a way that reminded me of myself at his age. He'd brought fresh energy to the firm, along with a roster of tech clients that had doubled our portfolio value in just 18 months. That morning, as I watched Iris with her friends, a message appeared on my phone. It was from Sarah, my executive assistant of 8 years, "Need to discuss something urgent. Can we meet privately?" There was something about the phrasing that sent a slight chill through me. Sarah wasn't prone to dramatics or unnecessary urgency. If she said it was urgent, it warranted immediate attention. "Come by the house," I texted back. "Iris has her tennis group until noon." While waiting for Sarah, I found myself staring at a family photo on my desk. It was from last year's Christmas in Aspen, Iris and me, flanked by our grown children. James, our son, had just made partner at his law firm in Boston. Emma, our daughter, was finishing her residency at Johns Hopkins. They were everything I'd hoped for in children, successful, independent, a perfect blend of Iris's grace and my drive. The sound of car tires on gravel drew my attention. Through the window, I watched Sarah's Tesla pull up the circular driveway. Even from this distance, I could see the tension in her shoulders as she emerged from the car. Sarah had been with me through countless crises, market crashes, hostile takeovers, federal investigations. I'd never seen her look this unsettled. I met her at the front door before she could ring the bell. Up close, the darkness under her eyes was evident despite careful makeup. She clutched her tablet to her chest like a shield. "Mike," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I've found something. About David." And she hesitated, glancing toward the pool area where Iris's laughter still echoed. And Iris. The world seemed to tilt slightly on its axis. Some part of me already knew what she was about to say, had perhaps known for months but refused to acknowledge the signs. The lingering glances, the late-night strategy sessions, the coincidental run-ins at charity events. "Show me," I said, leading her to my office. The walk felt like 1,000 miles. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she pulled up a series of emails on her tablet. I was reviewing the firm's private server backup for the SEC audit when I found these. They were deleted but I know how to check the archives. As I read, each word felt like a physical blow. The exchanges between David and Iris started professionally enough, discussions about foundation work, charity events. But they quickly evolved into something else. Something intimate. Something that made my stomach turn. "There's more," Sarah said softly. "Financial records. Private property purchases. A penthouse in Manhattan under an LLC. Joint accounts in the Caymans." The last email was from 3 days ago. "David to Iris, everything's in place. 2 more weeks, and we'll be free to start our new life. He'll never know what hit him. Through the window, I could still see Iris by the pool, radiant in the morning sun. She was laughing at something one of her friends had said, one manicured hand resting casually on her hip. How many times had those hands touched David? How long had they been plotting behind my back? Mike? Sarah's voice seemed to come from very far away. What do you want me to do? I took a deep breath, feeling ice crystallize in my veins. Nothing, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. You've done enough. Go back to the office. Act normal. Delete these from your tablet. Never mention this conversation to anyone. After Sarah left, I stood at my window for a long time, watching Iris with her friends. 20 years of marriage. 2 children. Countless memories. All built on a foundation of lies. The old Michael Harrison would have exploded in rage, would have confronted them immediately, would have burned everything down in a blaze of righteous fury. But that Michael died the moment I read those emails. In his place, something colder and more calculating was emerging. They wanted to destroy me. Fine. But I would teach them the true meaning of destruction. And when I was done, they would understand that some betrayals carry a price too terrible to contemplate. By the pool, Iris raised her glass in a toast, sunlight catching the diamonds on her fingers, diamonds I had given her, celebrating milestones in a marriage that had apparently meant nothing to her. I raised my own empty glass in a mock salute. Here's to new beginnings, I whispered to my reflection in the window. And to the art of patience. The next 2 weeks became an exercise in masterful performance art. Each morning, I kissed Iris goodbye as she left for her charity foundation meetings, tasting the lies on her lips. Each night, I played the role of the devoted husband, listening to her carefully crafted stories about fundraisers and donor dinners, while my mind catalogued every subtle tell in her expression, every minute hesitation in her voice. The woman I'd loved for 20 years had become a stranger wearing my wife's face. Yet beneath my carefully maintained facade of normalcy, something else was taking root, a cold, crystalline clarity that transformed each moment of pain into fuel for what was to come. You seem distracted lately, Michael, Iris said one evening, her fingers trailing across my shoulders as she passed behind my chair. The touch that once brought comfort now felt like acid on my skin. Is everything all right at the firm? I looked up from my laptop, where I'd been reviewing the financial records Sarah had uncovered. Just the usual market volatility, I replied, allowing a carefully measured note of weariness to color my voice. David's been invaluable in helping manage the tech portfolio. Her expression flickered at the mention of his name, a microscopic tell that I would have missed 2 weeks ago. Now it screamed like a siren in the quiet of our living room. He's certainly proven himself, she said, pouring herself a glass of the Bordeaux we brought back from our 20th anniversary trip to France. Another piece of our shared history that now felt like a cruel joke. The firm's lucky to have him. We all are, I agreed, raising my own glass in a toast that tasted of ashes and revenge. During the day, I moved through the firm like a ghost in an expensive suit, watching David hold court in conference rooms and charm clients with his boyish enthusiasm. He'd even taken to offering me marriage advice, his concern for my relationship with Iris so convincing it would have won him an Oscar. You need to make more time for her, Mike, he said during one particularly galling lunch meeting. Women like Iris need attention, appreciation. They wilt without it, like flowers in the shade. I nodded, imagining all the ways he'd been appreciating my wife while plotting to destroy everything I'd built. You're right, I said, my voice steady despite the rage churning beneath my ribcage. I'm lucky to have friends like you looking out for my marriage. But while they thought I was blind to their machinations, I was setting my own pieces on the board. Sarah's discovery had been just the beginning. I hired private investigators who documented their secret meetings at the Manhattan penthouse. I had forensic accountants trace the labyrinth of their offshore accounts. Most crucially, I began making my own carefully concealed financial moves, preparing for the storm I was about to unleash. The truth about revenge, I was learning, is that it requires patience. Not the restrained patience of a saint, but the predatory patience of a snake preparing to strike. 1 week before their planned coup, I received an unexpected call from my daughter Emma. "Dad," she said, her voice tight with an emotion I couldn't quite place, "I need to tell you something." "About Mom?" My blood froze. "What about her, sweetheart?" "I saw her last weekend in New York. She said she was there for a foundation event, but..." Emma's voice cracked. "She was with someone. A younger man. They were intimate." The irony of the moment wasn't lost on me, my own daughter unknowingly becoming a player in this tragic farce. "Are you sure it was her?" I asked, maintaining my performance even now. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I didn't know how to tell you. James saw them too, at some restaurant in Manhattan last month. We've been trying to figure out how to." She was crying now, my brilliant, compassionate daughter, carrying the weight of her mother's betrayal. "Emma, listen to me carefully," I said, my voice gentle despite the storm raging in my chest. "You and James did nothing wrong. But I need you to promise me something. Don't confront your mother. Not yet. Can you trust me on this?" "Of course, Dad." "But what are you going to do?" What was I going to do? I looked out my office window at the Manhattan skyline, at all the glittering towers built on ambition and betrayal. In one of those buildings, David was probably with Iris right now, both of them congratulating themselves on how perfectly their plan was unfolding. "I'm going to teach them a lesson about family," I said, watching a hawk circle high above the city. "About loyalty. About consequences." After hanging up with Emma, I made a call to an old friend at the SEC. Then another to my contact at the Justice Department. Finally, I reached out to Victor Crane, a rival investment banker who'd been trying to poach my tech portfolio, and specifically, David's clients, for the past year. All the pieces were in place. In 3 days, their carefully orchestrated plan to destroy me would collide with my own designs, and the resulting explosion would reshape all our lives forever. That night, I returned home to find Iris waiting with dinner and candlelight. "I thought we could use a romantic evening," she said, wearing the black dress I'd given her for her birthday. "Just the two of us." I smiled, accepting the glass of wine she offered, and settled in for another command performance in our theater of lies. But beneath the surface, beneath the masks we both wore so perfectly, I could feel the approaching storm. And for the first time since discovering her betrayal, I felt something close to peace. Because in 3 days, they would learn what I had known from the start, that some betrayals demand more than mere revenge, they demand complete and total annihilation. The morning I chose to begin dismantling their world, I stood before my bathroom mirror longer than usual, studying the man I had become. The face staring back at me was familiar yet strange, like a photograph slowly developing in reverse, revealing not who I was, but who I had always been capable of being. In my eyes, I saw something that would have terrified me 3 weeks ago, the cold, unflinching gaze of a predator. "You're up early," Iris murmured from our bed, her voice still thick with sleep. I watched her reflection appear behind mine, her arms sliding around my waist in a gesture that once meant everything and now felt like a serpent's embrace. "Coming to bed again?" I turned to face her, allowing myself to really look at her, this woman who had been my North Star for 2 decades, now revealed as nothing more than a false light leading ships to rocks. She was wearing one of my old Harvard t-shirts, her honey blonde hair tousled from sleep, and for a moment, the sight of her hit me with such bittersweet intensity that I almost wavered. "Can't sleep," I said, brushing a strand of hair from her face with deliberate tenderness. "Too much on my mind with the merger coming up." Her eyes flickered, another tell. She and David thought they knew about the merger, thought they had inside information about the deal I was supposedly orchestrating with Goldman Sachs. It was the cornerstone of their plan, use that information to orchestrate a hostile takeover while simultaneously draining our offshore accounts. But like everything else they thought they knew, it was a carefully crafted illusion. "You work too hard," she said, pressing herself against me in a way that once would have scattered my thoughts like autumn leaves. "Let me help you relax." I kissed her then, one last time, tasting the lies on her tongue and feeling nothing but a distant, clinical fascination at my own capacity for deception. "Tonight," I promised. After the board meeting. The drive to Manhattan felt surreal, as if I were watching myself from a great distance. The morning sun painted the city in shades of fire and gold, nature's own pathetic fallacy for the inferno I was about to unleash. My phone buzzed with a message from Victor Crane: "Everything's in place. Waiting on your signal." In the lobby of our building, David was already holding court, surrounded by a group of junior associates who hung on his every word. He spotted me emerging from the elevator and broke into that brilliant, practiced smile that had charmed so many clients, and my wife. "Mike. Just the man I needed to see." He fell into step beside me, all boyish enthusiasm and careful concern. "Listen, about the Goldman proposal, I've been running some numbers that I think you should look at." I led him into my office, noting how eagerly he followed. Like a wolf thinking it had cornered its prey, unaware it had walked into a trap. "Actually," I said, settling behind my desk, "I wanted to discuss something else with you. Something about a penthouse in Manhattan. And some very interesting offshore accounts." The change in his expression was subtle but profound, like watching a mask slip for just a fraction of a second. "I'm not sure I follow," he said, but the slight tremor in his voice told me everything. "No." I pulled up a series of documents on my computer screen, turning it so he could see. "Maybe these will help refresh your memory. Or we could call Iris. I'm sure between the two of you, you can explain why my wife's signature is on these property deeds. And these bank transfers. And these." I let the words trail off, watching the blood drain from his face. "Mike, I can explain." "Can you explain it to the SEC?" I asked quietly. "Because they're very interested in how you've been using insider information to manipulate stock prices. Or maybe you'd prefer to explain to the Justice Department about the money laundering. They're particularly interested in those Cayman accounts." He took a step backward, fight-or-flight instinct visibly warring across his features. "You're bluffing. You can't prove anything." I smiled then, the same smile I'd practiced in the mirror that morning. "Check your phone, David. Check the markets. Check anything you want. But do it quickly, because in about 30 seconds, every major financial news outlet is going to start running a story about corruption and fraud at Harrison Investment Partners. Specifically, about you." As if on cue, his phone began to buzz. Then mine. Then every phone in the office. Through my wall of windows, I could see people gathering around screens, could hear the growing murmur of shock and confusion. "You don't understand what you're doing," he said, desperation creeping into his voice. "Iris and Iris," I cut him off, "is about to learn a valuable lesson about choosing her allies more carefully. Did you really think I wouldn't notice the signs? That I wouldn't protect myself? You may be younger, David, but I've been playing this game since you were in grade school." His face contorted with something between rage and fear. "I'll destroy you. I'll take everything." "You can't take what I've already burned to the ground," I said softly. "Check your trading accounts. Check your precious offshore nest eggs. Check everything you thought you had hidden so carefully. It's amazing what can happen when you have friends in the right places, and the patience to wait for the perfect moment." The office beyond my door was in chaos now. I could hear Sarah's voice directing security, could hear the beginnings of panic as the magnitude of what was happening began to sink in. David's phone was buzzing continuously, each notification another nail in the coffin of his carefully constructed future. "This isn't over," he snarled, but we both knew it was. He turned to leave, only to find two SEC agents standing in my doorway, their badges already out. "Mr. Chen," one of them said, "we need you to come with us." As they led him away, I picked up my phone and dialed Iris's number. It rang once before going to voicemail. She was probably already seeing the news, already realizing that her carefully laid plans were unraveling thread by bloody thread. "The thing about glass houses," I said to the empty office, "is that they shatter so beautifully when you throw the right stones." My phone buzzed again, a message from Victor Crane: "Transfer complete. The tech portfolio is ours. Do you want me to proceed with Phase 2? I looked out at the Manhattan skyline, at the city that had witnessed so many rises and falls, so many betrayals and revenges. Somewhere out there, Iris was watching her world collapse, just as I had watched mine crumble 3 weeks ago. "Yes," I typed back. "Burn it all down." The day wasn't over yet. Not by a long shot. And I had saved the most exquisite pain for last. There's a peculiar silence that descends in the aftermath of destruction, a hollow, ringing emptiness that fills the space where anticipation once lived. As I stood in my office watching David being escorted out in handcuffs, that silence wrapped around me like a burial shroud, both comforting and suffocating. 17 missed calls from Iris illuminated my phone screen. Each one a desperate attempt to salvage what was already lost, each unanswered ring another small death in our shared history. The last message she'd sent read simply, "Please. We need to talk. Don't do this. Don't do this." As if I were the architect of our destruction, as if my hand had forced hers when she chose to build a life with David in the shadows of our marriage. The irony tasted like copper in my mouth, bitter, metallic, vital. Sarah appeared in my doorway, her face a masterpiece of controlled concern. "The reporters are gathering in the lobby," she said softly. "And the board is demanding an emergency meeting." I nodded, adjusting my tie in the reflection of the window. The man looking back at me seemed older somehow, as if revenge had carved new lines into my face, hollowed out the spaces behind my eyes. "Let them wait," I said. "There's something I need to do first." The drive to our Manhattan penthouse, their secret nest, their private paradise, felt like traversing the boundary between two worlds. In one, I was still Michael Harrison, the betrayed husband seeking justice. In the other, I was becoming something else entirely, something carved from harder stone. The doorman recognized me, of course. My name was on the deed, after all, one of the many threads I'd quietly gathered while they thought I remained ignorant. The private elevator rode smoothly to the top floor, each ascending floor a heartbeat bringing me closer to the moment I'd orchestrated. I found Iris in the master bedroom, frantically pulling designer clothes from the closet and stuffing them into leather suitcases. She froze when she saw me, a handful of silk blouses clutched to her chest like a shield. "It's too late for running," I said, my voice eerily calm even to my own ears. "The accounts are frozen. The properties are seized. Even this," I gestured to the room around us, "belongs to the federal investigation now. Michael." My name on her lips was both plea and poison. "You don't understand. What David and I had was worth destroying 20 years of marriage for." I moved to the window, looking out over the city that had witnessed our undoing. "Worth destroying our children's trust. Worth burning down everything we built together. The children?" Her voice cracked. "What have you told them?" "Nothing they hadn't already seen for themselves." I turned to face her, watching the realization dawn in her eyes. "Emma saw you here, with him. James caught you at Le Bernardin. They've been carrying that knowledge for weeks, protecting your secret while it ate them alive inside." She sank onto the edge of the bed, the clothes falling forgotten from her hands. "I never meant to hurt them. Or you. It just happened. Nothing just happens, Iris. You made choices. Every secret meeting, every hidden account, every lie you told me while planning to destroy everything I've built, those were choices. And this? She gestured wildly at the chaos around us. This calculated destruction. What do you call these choices? I call them consequences. I moved closer, close enough to catch the scent of her perfume, the same perfume I'd given her on our last anniversary. You and David thought you were so clever, so careful. But you never stopped to consider that I might be capable of the same level of deception. That I might learn from your example. Her phone buzzed, another message about the unfolding catastrophe, no doubt. David's arrest was probably headline news by now. The story of corruption, fraud, and betrayal would be feeding frenzies in newsrooms across the city. He'll talk, she said, a desperate edge creeping into her voice. David will tell them everything. About the insider trading, the offshore accounts. Let him. I smiled, and saw her flinch at whatever she saw in my expression. Every revelation, every accusation, will only strengthen the case against him. Against both of you. Did you really think I wouldn't document everything? That I wouldn't build an airtight case before I moved against you? The firm, she whispered. You're destroying everything you built. No, Iris. I'm burning it down to build something stronger from the ashes. Victor Crane's announcement goes public in an hour, a hostile takeover of Harrison Investment Partners, focusing specifically on the tech portfolio you and David thought was your golden ticket. The SEC investigation will conveniently reveal that the corruption was isolated to you and David. The firm will survive, rebranded and stronger than ever. But you. I let the words hang in the air between us. She stood suddenly, anger replacing fear in her eyes. You think you've won? That this revenge makes you powerful? Look at yourself, Michael. Look at what you've become. I caught my reflection in the bedroom mirror, this new self I'd forged in the crucible of their betrayal. What I've become, I said softly, is exactly what you and David created. Consider it your legacy. My phone vibrated, a message from Victor. The board meeting was about to begin, and with it, the final phase of my plan. The police will be here soon, I told her, moving toward the door. I'd suggest cooperating. It might help during sentencing. Michael. Her voice stopped me at the threshold. Did you ever really love me? Or was I just another acquisition, another asset in your portfolio? The question hit me like a physical blow, unexpected in its ability to pierce the armor I'd so carefully constructed. I looked back at her, this woman who had been my world for 20 years, now reduced to a stranger clutching designer clothes in a room full of lies. I loved you enough to give you everything, I said finally. And I loved you enough to take it all away when you proved unworthy of that trust. As I rode the elevator down, I felt something shift inside me, a final metamorphosis, a shedding of the last vestiges of who I had been. The man who had walked into this building seeking closure was not the same man walking out. That man had died in a bedroom full of half-packed suitcases and broken promises. In the lobby, reporters were gathering like vultures, their cameras flashing at my emergence. They wanted a story of betrayal and revenge, of power and corruption. But the real story, the one burning in my chest like a funeral pyre, was something far more personal, far more devastating. It was the story of how love, when twisted by betrayal, could forge a weapon sharper than any blade. And I was only beginning to understand the price of wielding it. The board meeting felt like a funeral for the man I used to be. As I stood before the gathered executives, their faces a gallery of shock and betrayal, I realized that every word I spoke was another shovelful of earth on that man's grave. The Michael Harrison they had known, trusting, honorable, predictable, was being buried beneath an avalanche of calculated revelations. The evidence against David Chen is irrefutable, I explained, my voice carrying the weight of practiced authority. The SEC investigation will show that he, along with certain collaborators, attempted to orchestrate a hostile takeover using insider information and fraudulent accounts. The words tasted like ash in my mouth, each syllable a reminder of intimate betrayals in darkness. In my mind's eye, I could see Iris in that penthouse bedroom, her world collapsing like a house of cards in a hurricane. The image should have brought satisfaction. Instead, it carved new hollows in spaces I thought had already been emptied of feeling. Victor Crane sat at the far end of the table, a serpentine smile playing at the corners of his mouth. He knew his role in this theater of destruction, the White Knight riding in to save the firm from scandal, his acquisition offer already drafted and ready for signatures. What he didn't know was how completely his own role had been choreographed, how deeply his part had been written into my symphony of retribution. The merger with Crane Capital, I continued, will ensure stability during this transition. Our clients' interests remain protected, our core portfolios intact. Protected. Intact. Words like bandages over mortal wounds, concealing the arterial spray of 2 decades of trust bleeding out onto imported marble floors. I caught my reflection in the polished surface of the conference table, a funhouse mirror version of myself, distorted by ripples of revenge and justification. Sarah appeared at the doorway, her presence a lighthouse beam cutting through the fog of memory and recrimination. Her slight nod told me everything. Iris had been taken into custody. The federal agents had found exactly what I'd led them to find, each piece of evidence a breadcrumb on a trail I'd spent weeks meticulously laying. There's one final matter, I said, drawing out a folder that felt heavier than its physical weight warranted. An internal audit has revealed discrepancies in our offshore holdings. Accounts that trace back to the Cayman Islands, to a series of shell corporations, and ultimately. I paused, letting the tension build like pressure in a fault line, to Victor Crane himself. The room erupted in chaos. Victor's face transformed from smug satisfaction to naked panic in the space of a heartbeat. As federal agents emerged from the adjacent conference room, I watched his desperate attempts to delete files from his phone, to reach his lawyers, to salvage something from the wreckage of his own hubris. "You see, Victor," I said softly, though my voice somehow carried over the commotion, "when you agreed to help me destroy David and Iris, you never stopped to ask why I would burn down my own firm. You never wondered if perhaps the real target was someone else entirely." Understanding dawned in his eyes like a sunrise in hell. "The tech portfolio," he whispered. "The offshore accounts. Were all traceable back to you. Every illegal transaction, every fraudulent transfer, all documented and delivered to the SEC with a neat little bow. Did you really think I didn't know about your attempts to poach my clients? Your backdoor dealings with my competitors? Your patient, years-long campaign to dismantle everything I built?" The agents were moving toward him now, their badges catching the morning light like thrown daggers. "This was never about Iris and David," I continued, watching him being handcuffed with the same clinical detachment I'd felt watching my marriage dissolve. "They were just the catalyst, the perfect opportunity to draw you out, to make you overreach. To make you think you'd finally found my weakness." As they led him away, I remained standing at the head of the table, surrounded by the stunned silence of my remaining board members. In the space of an hour, I had orchestrated the fall of not just my unfaithful wife and her lover, but also my longest-standing corporate enemy. The victory should have felt triumphant. Instead, it felt like standing in the eye of a hurricane, knowing that the worst devastation was still to come. My phone buzzed, a message from James: "Dad, Emma and I are on our way. Are you okay?" Was I okay? The question seemed absurd, almost obscene in its simplicity. I looked out at the Manhattan skyline, at all the glittering towers that had witnessed my transformation from trusted husband and business leader to something altogether more dangerous, more devastating. The man I used to be would have had an answer ready, would have offered reassurance and stability. But that man was dead, buried under an avalanche of betrayal and calculated vengeance. In his place stood someone else, someone forged in the crucible of perfect, exquisite pain. And his work wasn't finished. Not yet. Because in the end, the most excruciating pain isn't in the strike that draws blood, it's in the slow, methodical twisting of the blade. And I had saved the sharpest blade for last, one final act of retribution that would ensure none of them would ever forget the true cost of betrayal. The board meeting dispersed, leaving me alone with the ghost of who I had been and the shadow of who I had become. Outside my window, storm clouds were gathering over Manhattan, nature's own pathetic fallacy for the tempest about to break. I picked up my phone, fingers hovering over Emma's message. The truth about revenge, I was learning, is that it demands payment not just from its targets, but from the one wielding it. And the price, oh, the price was beyond calculation. But I was already too far down this path to turn back. The only way out was through, even if what waited on the other side was nothing but the ashes of everything I'd once held dear. They say that in the moment before death, your life flashes before your eyes. What they don't tell you is that the same thing happens when you deliberately murder the person you used to be. As I stood in our Greenwich mansion that evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of blood and gold, every memory of my former self stretched before me like shadows on a sundial, growing longer, darker, more distorted with each passing moment. The house was silent now, emptied of the lies that had once filled its spaces. In the kitchen, Iris's coffee cup still sat in the sink from that morning, a casual artifact from a life that no longer existed. How many mornings had I watched her lips touch that rim, tasting betrayal with her morning espresso? How many casual kisses had we exchanged across that counter, each one a currency of deception? Emma and James arrived together, their faces carrying the weight of children forced to witness the implosion of their parents' paradise. The moment they stepped through the door, I felt the full magnitude of what I had orchestrated, not just the destruction of a marriage, but the shattering of an entire family's foundation. "Dad," Emma began, but stopped short when she saw my face. Whatever she found there made her take an involuntary step backward, as if she'd encountered a stranger wearing her father's skin. "You should sit down," I said, gesturing to the living room where we'd spent so many Christmas mornings, so many family celebrations. Each memory now felt like a photograph burning at the edges, curling into ash. "There's something you need to understand about today's events." James, ever the lawyer, settled into his usual chair with practiced composure. But I could see the tremor in his hands, the slight displacement of his usual confidence. "We saw the news," he said. "About Mom and David. And Victor Crane." "What you saw," I replied, my voice sounding distant even to my own ears, was the surface of a much deeper ocean. "Your mother's affair with David wasn't a simple betrayal, it was merely the first thread in a tapestry of deception I've spent weeks unraveling." I moved to the bar, pouring 3 glasses of the 30-year-old Macallan we'd been saving for special occasions. The irony of using it now, in this moment of ultimate destruction, felt appropriately bitter. 3 weeks ago, I discovered their plan to destroy everything I'd built. The affair was just camouflage for something far more insidious, a coordinated attack on the firm, on our family's legacy, on everything we've spent decades building. Emma's hands shook as she accepted her glass. "But why? Mom loved you. She loved us." "Love," I said, tasting the word like poison, "is the perfect blind spot. The perfect weakness to exploit. They counted on my love for your mother to blind me to their machinations. Just as Victor Crane counted on their betrayal to blind me to his own plans." I explained everything then, the offshore accounts, the shell companies, the elaborate dance of deception and counter-deception. With each revelation, I watched understanding dawn in my children's eyes, followed by something darker, more complicated. "You didn't just stop them," James said slowly, his legal mind assembling the pieces. "You orchestrated their destruction. All of them. You used Mom's betrayal as bait to trap Crane. And Crane's ambition as the lever to ensure their complete annihilation," I confirmed. "Every account frozen, every asset seized, every escape route closed. By this time tomorrow, the name Harrison will be synonymous not with scandal, but with resilience. The firm will emerge stronger, cleansed of corruption. And your mother will go to prison," Emma finished, her voice barely a whisper. The silence that followed felt like a living thing, breathing in the spaces between us. Outside, the storm that had been threatening all day finally broke, rain lashing against windows that had witnessed 20 years of family dinners, of homework sessions, of quiet Sunday mornings that now felt like scenes from someone else's life. "You've become something else," James said, studying me with a lawyer's practiced scrutiny. "Something harder." "No," I corrected him, moving to the window to watch lightning split the sky. "I've become what I always was, beneath the veneer of civilization your mother helped me maintain. The man you knew, the man who prioritized love over power, trust over control, that man was the illusion." "And what happens now?" Emma asked, her doctor's instincts perhaps sensing the deeper wounds beneath my calculated exterior. I turned back to them, these children who carried both my strength and Iris's grace, who would inherit the aftermath of this calculated apocalypse. Now we rebuild. But not like before. No more illusions, no more comfortable lies. The world your mother and I built for you was a fantasy, a glass palace that shattered at the first real test. What rises from these ashes will be something stronger, something unbreakable. At what cost? Emma's voice cracked, tears finally breaking through her composure. The question hung in the air like smoke, forcing me to confront the true price of my transformation. In destroying Iris, David, and Crane, I had also destroyed the father my children had known, the man who had taught them about love and trust and mercy. The cost, I said finally, is everything we thought we were. Everything we pretended to be. But what we gain? I lifted my glass, watching the amber liquid catch the lightning's flash, is the truth. And truth, my children, is the only foundation worth building on. As we sat there in the growing darkness, listening to the storm rage outside, I felt the last pieces of my old self finally fall away. The revenge I had orchestrated was complete, perfect in its devastation. But the real victory wasn't in destroying those who had betrayed me, it was in destroying the man who could be betrayed. In his place stood someone new, someone forged in the crucible of absolute betrayal and tempered by the cold satisfaction of complete revenge. Someone who would never again mistake compliance for loyalty or silence for love. The storm outside intensified, nature's own accompaniment to our family's transformation. In the morning, the sun would rise on a new reality, one where the name Harrison would mean something different, something harder and more absolute. But for now, in this moment between destruction and rebirth, I sat with my children in the wreckage of their childhood certainties, and together we watched the last embers of paradise burn to ash.